China is now, I would say, equivalent. This is something that's really, it's difficult to say this. In fact, I just said the other day, you should never say this. I'm going to say something now that I just said the other day in public. One should never say this, and now I'm going to say it. It's as bad as the Holocaust. Now, what I said the other day was one should never compare anything to either the Holocaust or to American slavery, because they just stand alone. There's just, it's kind of a special kind of evil. And comparing anything to them tends to diminish them because the thing you compare to them tends to be smaller. Is this smaller? Do you know how many Falun Gong there are in China? The Holocaust was what, 6 million? They're going to beat that number. They are going to beat that number. Other sources have estimated the Falun Gong population in China to have peaked between 10 and 70 million practitioners. It's between 10 and 70 million practitioners. And China is using them for parts. You may remember that in the past I have been skeptical of the so-called Chinese killing of prisoners just for their organs to sell them. And the part that I was doubting in particular, I was not doubting that they execute people, and I was not doubting that they use the organs of the executed prisoners. So that part, I figured, well, that's probably true. I mean, that doesn't even sound that controversial, because if you're going to execute them anyway, it's China, why not use the spare parts? So that part was completely believable. Because I was a little skeptical, this has attracted much new information to me. And one of the things I say in my book, Lose or Think, is I say that if you want to know how to do something right, one of the fast ways to do it is to do it wrong in public. If you do something wrong in public, it attracts all this good advice. My God, you did it wrong. You should have done it this way. Why didn't you look at this link? I would have done it this way. Can I help you? So this is a perfect example. So I gave my opinion that it seemed ridiculous to imagine that the Chinese were systematically using the Falun Gong or the Uyghurs for spare parts and killing them just for parts. In other words, they weren't going to die anyway. They were killing them just for the parts. And apparently you have to keep the body alive after the brain is dead in order to get a good transplant. So the thought is that they were, shooting them in the brain or killing them in some way that keeps the heart beating so that they can get the organs. And I said, well, that's crazy. There's no way they're doing that in some large, systematic way. Well, saying that in public attracted many sources of information. And I would like to officially revise my opinion. It looks pretty clear that there is a widespread Chinese program to eliminate at least the Falun Gong. We don't know about the Uyghurs yet, but apparently they are using them for parts, and they are telling them, apparently there are lots of reports where the guards are actually telling the Falun Gong that they're going to use them for parts. And they even x-ray them and test their blood, and when they beat them, which they do, they torture them, they make sure that they don't hurt their organs. And they actually say that. And there are a number of reports from people who are actually in the Chinese jails. Now, if we had a few reports I would say, oh, I don't believe a few reports, because there's always someone who's willing to say that country did some atrocity. You can always get somebody to say that any country did an atrocity. So a few people, I'm not going to buy that. But apparently, statistically, it's impossible to have organs on demand unless you're killing people on demand. Yeah, there's just no physical, mathematical, practical way to have that many organs. And apparently, you can go to China and just get yourself a kidney fresh off the corpse. Well, I guess it's not a corpse. So, I am now a convert. I revised my opinion. It does seem that China has gone full Nazi, full Hitler. So China is now, I would say, equivalent. This is something that's really, it's difficult to say this. In fact, I just said the other day, you should never say this. I'm going to say something now that I just said the other day in public. One should never say this, and now I'm going to say it. It's as bad as the Holocaust. Now, what I said the other day was one should never compare anything to either the Holocaust or to American slavery, because there's really, they just stand alone. There's just, they're kind of a special kind of evil. And comparing anything to them tends to diminish them because the thing you compare to them tends to be smaller. Is this smaller? Do you know how many Falun Gong there are in China? The Holocaust was what, 6 million? They're going to beat that number. They are going to beat that number because there are way more Falun Gong, right? If I'm saying it right. Somebody give me a number in there. Well, hold on a second. I will Google this. How many Falun Gong? How many? How do you spell that? Falun Gong in China. Somebody will probably say it in the comments. Let's see. Other sources have estimated the Falun Gong population in China to have peaked between 10 and 70 million practitioners. It's between 10 and 70 million practitioners. And China is using them for parts. I think that's just a fact. So, the thing I said the other day is like, well, there's never going to be anything like the Holocaust, so stop comparing things to it. If you just go by the numbers, China's going to go for the record, and that seems pretty clear right now. Now, the thing that blows my mind about this is that the Falun Gong thing, which I don't fully understand, is more like a practice than a religion. There's some kind of a spiritual component to it, but it's more like a lifestyle, self-improvement sort of thing. I don't quite understand. It has something to do with, exercises that improve your energy or something like that. I'm going to have to look into it. But apparently, if you get picked up and say for being a practitioner, all you really need to do is sign a document that says you renounce it, and then you're good. And the people who are jailed and beaten don't want to sign the document that says, oh, I renounce this. Now, if you were going to be beaten and then used for parts, and all you had to do is sign a document that says, oh, I renounce my yoga, wouldn't you do it? So there's some part of this I don't quite understand. I don't see why people are so insistent on dying for, a self-help process. So clearly there's something I don't understand about what the Falun Gong people are getting out of the whole thing. All right. I have to give you an update. Yeah, I know they're treated as a cult, so maybe the idea is that there's so many of them that they could be organized or something, I suppose. But they could still organize after they sign the piece of paper. You can still sign the piece of paper and then just go off and do it in your home while nobody's looking.